Olivia, it is so great to speak to you today. First of all, how are you doing in your current chapter of life? I know we're seeing on the show things that happened quite a while ago. So, what's new with you now and how are you doing?
I feel like I am thriving, honestly, which I've said before. But I think like where I currently am, I feel the most myself I've ever been. I feel like there have been times in my life where I've been super curious and still felt like there was some kind of box holding me in of questions I couldn't ask or things I couldn't do. And there's no ceiling now. Which is kind of exciting, looking forward, like what do I want to do and who do I want to be? And maybe that's not the most fun thing to figure out at 26 when I feel like I should already have figured it out, but it's still freeing in a way.
Oh no, it's a lifelong process, you know. It's good to embrace at any point. So a lot has happened with you over the past 2 years with your and Ethan split. What is it like to watch that chapter of your life back now on this current season of Plathville?
I think in many ways it feels like the final like closure, watching it back going like, oh yeah, I made the right choice. That was what was right for me. That is a dynamic I no longer was willing to be a part of or perpetuate. Yeah, it's not like it's necessarily healing because it's still hard to watch in some aspects, but it feels like closure.
Now, you said it was the right decision. With all the hindsight that you have now, looking back, when do you think was the turning point in the marriage where you knew that splitting was the right decision?
I think there was a lot of little things that happened throughout the years that I chose to overlook, that I chose to not make like a huge deal. There were things that I definitely voiced my opinion over, but at the end of the day, I couldn't change it. So I let it slide. When I look back now, I don't know if there was one specific point in time. It was more just a buildup over time of like, wow, I really don't want this kind of relationship for the rest of my life. If I'm this unhappy in this relationship, it's going to continue the rest of my life. Um, and I was just really stubborn and not wanting to give up. And when Ethan finally said, like, yeah, I don't see a future together if you're gonna think the way that you do, it was a big sigh of relief of like, okay, then I agree with you. I've kind of been thinking the same thing, but like I didn't want to be the one to say it because I wasn't gonna give up on this and I was being stubborn for no reason. Um, so yeah, I think it ended before it ended.
Now, we pick up with you coming back, having this tense reunion after these months away in California. What were those months in California like for you?
Honestly, they were so peaceful. Like I remember telling people like I feel like my life is boring now. Now that like I don't have all this drama everywhere, like it just feels peaceful. Like I'm working and spending my time trying new things and hobbies, making new friends. Like it just felt very, very calm. And I think that's exactly what I needed.
hmm What was the biggest realization that you came to during those months in California, having that time apart, processing the split and being on your own?
Um, I think I had felt for a while that the absence of like Ethan or his family in my life would be a huge, like empty place to fill because they had been a part of my life for like 10 years, like a big part of my life for 10 years. And I, living in LA, realized actually how much more peaceful my life was. And how, yeah, we had good times together. And like, I'm not going to regret those times. I'm not going to try to pretend they didn't happen because of how everything ended, but it's not anything I need to revisit. And walking away from all of that opened up so much space in my life for other people and other relationships that are a lot healthier, that actually are a lot more fulfilling.
We also see in the season premiere in episode 2 that Ethan is not ready to sign the divorce paperwork, but you are. Was your disagreement on that surprising to you? And how did you feel about his position on things in the moment?
That was actually a shock to me. Um, because he said that like there was no future for us together. So I was like, no big deal. We'll just sign divorce papers. And he changed his mind. And that drug out for a long time. And that was actually really hard because I wanted to just move on. Um, yeah, that was not the most fun reunion.
You guys do eventually sign the divorce papers, and I'm sure we're going to see that whole journey between there where he's saying, I'm not ready, I don't want to yet, let's maybe give this another shot, to when he finally signs the papers. What can you tease to us about what that path was like?
I will say we did not sign papers like on camera. I asked for that to be private and separate. I was like, that's way too emotional. That just no, we're not doing that. The rest of the process was just like come back later, not gonna do this now, and me just trying to be like, what? I don't understand this. And still living life. So I I know that there's a lot of people who will say like, oh, if the papers are not signed, you're not actually divorced. And I strongly disagree with that. To me, like the papers are the government. That's the government needing a record of that. Like the day that Ethan and I said we were done and we went our separate ways and moved out, we were both single. And if he wants to see anyone at that point, totally fine, up to him. I know that I took a few months to kind of get my bearings, but then I started going on dates here and there, which is what I did when he didn't want to sign papers. I was like, all right, I guess I'll just keep living my single life and trying to learn and understand better and get more experience and figure out what I want.
What is your dynamic with Ethan as exes right now? Where do you guys stand? Is there any communication?
No, which there's somewhat still needs to be to figure things out, because not everything is finalized still, but no, currently no communication.
Has there been any communication with his family?
I think in the next couple episodes, and this was teased on a teaser, that Mariah and I had a conversation, which was very interesting. And she's the only one of the family that reached out to talk with me.
Interesting. So, for anyone else who might be in a similar situation or similar relationship as you were in with Ethan and is maybe weighing whether they should keep going or, take that step and file for divorce, what advice would you give that person?
Well, if anyone ever asked for advice, I would say, okay, here's what I did. You do you. I want to make sure that's very clear that I'm not like telling people what to do with their relationship. For me personally, there were things that happened in my relationship with Ethan in front of my younger sister, Lydia, that I remember thinking, I can't believe my sister saw me in this kind of situation. Um, because what I'm basically saying is this is okay to be treated this way in a relationship. And I felt like a terrible example for her. I also started getting to the point where I was thinking like if my child was ever in a relationship like this, how would I feel? And I was like, I would never want to see my child in a relationship like this. I would never want to see my best friend in a relationship like this. And that was for me one of the last like litmus tests that I did with myself where I was like, okay, it's actually over. Um, every relationship is different. Sometimes counseling and therapy helps and sometimes it doesn't. And I just think like long-term big picture, what is this going to look like down the road? Is anything going to change? If it's not, are you okay with the way it is now? And if you're not, then like why stay?
What moments from like your post breakup personal journey are you excited for fans to see on this season of the show?
I feel like I tried to be pretty honest when it comes to dating on the show and talking about how growing up in purity culture was really hard when it came to dating. There was a lot of residue of that left in my life that I didn't realize, a lot of shame that I felt inside. I didn't realize I was still carrying. Um, and I feel like throughout the show of dating, relationships, trying to figure all of that out, I tried to be pretty honest and upfront with that. And I know that there's a lot of people coming from very religious, confining backgrounds who would relate to that. So I hope that people who need to see that and that it helps show them that like it's okay, like we're all gonna mess up along the way and it feels really big and scary and it brings up a lot of things inside that are hard to deal with, but it's so worth dealing with them and asking those questions and powering through and getting to the other side of being truer to yourself and more free.
I'm sure there will be a lot of fans that will like see themselves in you as you go through that journey. Everyone really just wants to see you happy and maybe find love again. And it looks like, based on a recent Instagram Q&A, that there is someone special in your life. I know you said that you want to keep things more private than last time and you only want to share what you're comfortable with. But what, if anything, would you like people to know about this special guy and this chapter of your life right now?
Well, it plays out a little bit on the end of the season, so I can definitely tease that and say that like end of the season, you guys might get to meet him, and see a tiny bit of like our new relationship. It is one of the most healing things I've ever experienced. It's one of the happiest times of my life. And yeah, I think on social media, I've decided to keep it a little bit more quiet and private. People have a million and one opinions. And I've been through a public relationship and there are parts of it that are really hard. So on social media, I keep it a little bit more quiet, but definitely get to meet him at the end of this season, and get to know a little bit more about him.
You talked a little bit about why you want to keep this relationship a little bit more under wraps. Why was that decision important to you after what you'd experienced before?
Well, I think a lot of it was respecting him as well, that he doesn't have a public life, hasn't gone through the same like I mean, I've been through like years of having a public life now, so when people have a million and one opinions, I'm just kind of like, Psh, okay. For someone like him having much more of a quiet private life, that felt very overwhelming. And so that was one way to just kind of like respect the fact that he was walking into okay, I will say when it came to dating, I was a little scared because I was like, well, I have a public life, and is everyone okay with that? And then if people are like, is it for the right reasons? I was just like very nervous about that. So we had that conversation pretty early on of what is this gonna look like if we're gonna date, if we're gonna have a relationship. And yeah, on socials, I keep it a little bit more quiet, give him his privacy. On the show, we can choose what to say, what to share. So that felt like a really good compromise.
During that chapter where you were single, what qualities in your head were you looking for that next partner? And also, have you found them?
I think the two main things that were really important to me was curiosity and compassion. So I wanted someone who was going to look at my life that I try to fill with like new adventures and learning about things. I wanted someone that was going to match that, and not try to dampen that. And then I also wanted someone who was emotionally available. Like when I say compassion, I meant like emotionally available, to have those hard conversations and to have empathy and like be able to regulate their own emotions and work through things. And yes, I found that. And again, it's been one of the most healing things ever.
That's so nice to hear. Now, on episode 2 of this season, it was pretty funny to see the tarot card reader predict that you're going to have one marriage. And I guess it already happened. I have to imagine that was interesting to hear. But I'm curious, just through everything you've been through, has your perspective on marriage changed at all? Is that something that you hope for in the future, or do you see things differently? What are your thoughts on it?
I think my idea of marriage has changed since I was 18 and thinking about getting married for the first time. That back then it was like, all right, this is forever. This is a forever thing. And the one thing I've said to my partner now is I'm in this as long as it's healthy and happy for both of us. And if the day comes that that changes, then we need to be able to walk away or reevaluate. I don't see it as like a forever thing anymore because you never know what's going to happen in life. And you never know like if people will continue to grow and evolve or if they won't. I do want to get married again someday. I think that I love monogamous relationships. I love long-term relationships. I quickly found that out in dating. That like casual connections are really hard for me because I want more and I want to get to know someone better. So yeah, I'll get married again someday for sure. But I think this time instead of focusing on the idea of being together forever, I would rather focus more on like the steps to make that work, or like how do I make this relationship currently the healthiest, happiest it can be. And that's all I need to focus on.
Yeah, just whatever phase you're in right now, and
Yeah.
just making that the best that it can be. A moment that like really touched me during your tarot reading is when the tarot card reader said that you had an angel with you and your late brother, and I thought that that was so, heartbreaking and beautiful. I'm curious, like, what are the ways that you keep his memory with you during this time?
Um, I think in really large fundamental family dynamics, siblings don't have the same kind of bonds that they might growing up in different families. So when I look at my younger brother that died last year, we like larger families in that circle, they have like buddy systems, where older kids take care of younger kids. So that was the kid that I took care of. So that feels like a much stronger bond in some ways. And at the same time, because I'm no longer religious and living my life on my own terms, I wasn't allowed to see him like for the last 5 years. My parents didn't want me around him. So on the one hand, I feel like it's a very like that grief feels like a big burden, but it's like I remember him as a little kid. I didn't know the person who passed away because I wasn't allowed to spend time with him. And that makes me feel a little bit more removed from it. It's a very weird feeling to try to explain that to people. Um, I will say that like my sister Lydia and I talk about him a lot. I try to call some of my siblings on his birthday or Christmas or whatever and just, talk about good times and remember things. Yeah, it's a weird dynamic. I think it brought up a lot of unhealed things in me from my childhood and my parents. And as I've worked through those, I think I've just accepted things for the way that they are and remembered the little kid that I used to know and love and will always remember.
Before I let you go, I'm curious about how you see your future on Plathville. Would you like to continue to share your journey on the show now post split in future seasons? How do you see it?
I have no idea, Stephanie. Um, for right now, finishing out this season, I think it made sense. Getting divorced, kind of moving forward, what does that look like? I think also like in shows that talk about these large fundamental families, and talk about like kids that keep the faith and stay close to family and kind of keep that pattern. Um, I think it's important to show the opposite of what happens when a kid walks away from that and decides not to live that lifestyle and how it might not work for them, what questions they're going to have, what things that they're going to have a hard time overcoming. So I know for this season specifically, it felt right. I don't know about futuristically of the show. I guess we will have to both wait and see. It'll be a surprise to both of us.